Live from the Dr. Jerry Henderson Radio Complex, it's time for Card Guys. And now, here's your host, Anthony Schulte.
Good morning or good afternoon, whenever you may be listening to this program. Thank you, Michael, for the intro as always, and welcome to Card Guys, Detroit Sports Talk, Season 2, Episode 23. Coming up today, we have a special guest. Johnny Kane will be joining the show. I'm Anthony Schulte, and joining me as always, my man, Ryan Donnelly.
It's always a good day when we have a guest. Welcome, Johnny.
Yes. And right next to me, Mr. Michael Rosenkrantz.
What a beautiful Wednesday it is, and what a great day for another special guest. Johnny, welcome.
And joining us fresh off a Tigers win in Pittsburgh, he contributes as a play-by-play talent, host, and reporter for Bally Sports Detroit, Mr. Johnny Kane, everybody. Johnny, thanks for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us today. Can you hear us?
Yeah, I got you good, man. How you guys doing?
Oh, we're doing great. It's a beautiful Wednesday morning out here in Mount Pleasant, coming off a nice Tigers win, the only victorious team in Detroit yesterday, sadly. But, Johnny, starting us off today, we do our 3 stars segment from the past few evenings in sports. How about you start us off with your 3 stars?
Well, I'll tell you what. I thought, yesterday, it just goes to show you, like, with this team, with the Tigers in particular, you're thinking you're going to get out of Pittsburgh winless, and then for what they were able to put together in the 9th inning, I'd say, the go-ahead RBI from Kerry Carpenter was huge, and they were obviously able to stack on top of that. So that was big to get them going, to at least get a split there in Pittsburgh. And I wish I was able to put in something Pistons-oriented into my 3-star there, but they took one on the chin again last night in Philly. So I would say probably I got to stick with Detroit. I don't know, man. I'm trying to figure what would be best, from a standpoint of the performances that we've seen. We've seen some collective effort. So I'll say I'm going to go with my 2nd star to Riley Green. I'm going to take that from yesterday's game as well. The play he made in left field to rob Ke'Bryan Hayes of the home run yesterday against Pittsburgh, which kept the game intact. So I'm going to go with that one. And I'm sticking Tigers theme, and I'm going to go overall with Matt Vierling, who, obviously is a guy that can plug all over the place. And I just like the way he goes about his business. And then I'm going to stick with what he did yesterday in the field with Robin Oliveras of extra bases in center field, and made another great play in that game as well against Triolo. So I just like they can plug him all over the place, and he made a couple of big plays that kept that game within reach for those guys to come back and battle at the end. So I know you mentioned over the last couple of days, but I would just go based on what I saw yesterday. Those are the types of plays that are going to keep this team, on the path that they're on. So I'm going to go with 3 Tigers and all 3 plays coming from yesterday.
I agree, and a big game yesterday from the Tigers, snapping a 3-game skid. With my stars, my 3rd star, we're going to go UConn going back-to-back on Monday. It's rare to see a back-to-back in college basketball, and UConn pulled it off. Wasn't it the first team since Florida? Right?
Yeah.
Yes,
back in the late 2000s. So UConn is my 3rd star. Number 2, Shea Langoliers. He hit a home run to go ahead in the 9th to beat the Rangers. The Athletics beat the Rangers, so it kind of makes those losses sting a little bit less over the weekend to the Athletics. And then my 1st star, it's just the overall Tigers 9th inning rally. I mean, coming back from down behind, that's why you never give up. You never give up, and you could score a platoon of runs, and all of a sudden you're going to the bottom of the 9th. You were, might not go into the bottom of the 9th. Now all of a sudden we're going to the bottom of the 9th with a chance to win it. So my 3 stars, UConn back-to-back, Shea Langoliers, and the Tigers 9th inning rally. Ryan, what do you got for us?
For my 3 stars, I do have Kerry Carpenter as my 3rd star. He was very nice yesterday, getting us that knock to get us the extra 2 runs. My 2nd star, Jaden Ivey's overall performance yesterday against the Sixers. 25 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists, no steals, and a block on Buddy Hield. He went 8 for 17 from the field and 6 of 9 from 3. in 32 minutes. So an overall solid performance. The only bright side in this Pistons season outside of Cade Cunningham. And my first star, Zach Edey. Zach Edey, who was phenomenal against the Huskies. He had 37 points. Just overall a very solid game and
good tournament for him as well.
Very good tournament. Respect for, although I'm a big Michigan fan, and although I'm not a big Purdue guy, I've never liked Purdue. I have a lot of respect for him, and he's had a very respectable career.
He'll have a solid NBA career as well.
I think
forward.
He will too. I think he'll get drafted late first round because of how slow he is. That kind of brings him down a little bit. But at the same time, he's going to be a solid backup big man. On
a contender, too, usually a team with a later pick, he's going to be pretty solid. Michael, what do you got for us?
Yeah, so for my 3 stars, I'm going to go with Gio Urshela. He went 2 for 4 yesterday and really helped fuel the comeback for the Tigers. And he had an overall good performance, and Tigers got a great win yesterday in Pittsburgh. They're 7-4 on the year. My second star is going to go to Tyler Glasnow, who ended up getting me 34 points on fantasy baseball last night.
There it is.
Going 7 innings, 3 hits, no runs, no walks, 14 strikeouts in the Dodgers' 6-3 win over the Twins, I want to say. And then my first star is got to go to NCAA's winningest coach, Tara Vanderveer. She finally announced her, not finally, but she announced her retirement just late yesterday evening from Stanford, and what an incredible career. Over 1,200 wins over the course of 45 years, 3 national championships in 90, 92, and 2021 with Stanford. Went out with a bang, coaching Cameron Brink and that team. So I couldn't think of a better way to go out, but those are my 3 stars.
And if you heard a little music, we apologize.
That was me, guys.
That was the thing. Ryan's phone just started to play music or something.
It started playing country music for some reason. I don't know why, but that's on me. I apologize. That was not
YouTube.
Scripted.
That's not on us.
That
YouTube.
was a mistake.
Don't copyright us.
Sorry.
Please. All right, Johnny. We're going to start off today's show. We were talking a little bit earlier in the week, and you said you collect some cards. So we're curious here on Card Guys. We enjoy sports cards as well. What's your collection looking like, and what do you mainly collect?
So, yeah, good question, man. When I was littler, I should say, my brother and I were big into collecting cards. And so the thing is, as a lot of people, it all kind of depends when you get started. So, a lot of my cards when I was getting started would be, like 90s. And, I have like a lot of late 80s, but a lot of it's mass-produced stuff. So, I think I have, at this point, more than 40,000 cards in my personal collection.
Wow.
But, yeah,
jeez.
Hauling those across the country every time I moved was a treat. But once I started, because you're just buying, like the 50-cent packs, whenever you're saving up your money to do things. But then I started, once I actually got a little bit older, I started to collect things that I really liked. So, I have what one card dealer told me was the largest Jerry Rice card collection that he's ever seen. I tried to collect every Jerry Rice card that had ever been made. So that's pretty heavy. I collect a lot of vintage football with NFL. So I collected a lot of Walter Payton's, Gale Sayers, things of that nature. But probably my most prized possession, because I do love collecting vintage baseball, so that would probably be my favorite. So right now I'm looking at I have a 1957 Topps Mantle, which is one of my favorite cards of all time. So that's the kind of stuff. The older I got, the more vintage I could get, because you were able to have, not that it was you finally have 2 nickels to rub together, so you kind of get some of the cool stuff that you saw as a kid. And then there was a guy at a card dealership in Topeka, Kansas, Jeff Sports Cards, I remember. He hooked me up with a good deal on that Mantle, because I love collecting the vintage stuff. So anyway, that's kind of where I'm at. But I know the game, one of my best buddies in the whole world, he is big into it, has always been, and he moves a lot of product. And, I'd watch him rip, wax packs and all that stuff. And he's had some unbelievable pulls over the years. But I was more of a vintage guy, so that's where I go with it.
Do you have any more modern stuff, or is it just specifically and exclusively vintage?
No, It's mostly vintage. That's the thing. I know, like I said, my thing about it is, like, I gave you the number of how many I probably have, but the reason I say that is I know how I am, and if I start pulling again, then it's going to be a problem.
Yeah, especially
so
you
I
said.
try not to get into I don't have as much modern now, but that's more or less like just me trying to be disciplined to not stockpile.
Yeah, you said 50-cent packs. Do I wish those still existed? It costs about $10 for a pack now, and it's like, oh my goodness, the sports card industry has skyrocketed. But if you were to collect a modern player, like you said, you have a Jerry Rice personal collection. If you were to collect one modern player, any sport, any level, who would it be?
Yeah, that's great. So my buddy that I mentioned was big into it. You're always trying to find like the next big thing. So I remember he pulled at the time. He was a big Michigan fan, so he collected all the Tom Brady rookies like at the time. But that was before. I wouldn't say before, but it was before they started, adding like a ton of like the autos and like in the packs or like jersey patches and all that stuff that made it completely unique. So like you try to bet on a rookie that's going to hit, like Wemby, everybody knows obviously is going to hit. My other buddy like collected a bunch of Aaron Judge when he first came up because he thought like that was going to hit. So you're trying to, figure out who that next star is going to be that maybe, isn't as widely known. I guess if I were to start collecting now, great question. Let's go, just because I was going to say, I don't even think he's got a bunch of product out, but let's say I'd go with somebody like a Max Clark, you know what I mean?
He does have some Bowman stuff out. He does
have a Max Clark Bowman U.
There you go. So that's where I'd go. I'd go somewhere like that, somewhere where I have like a personal tie-in, you know what I mean? And then you've got a vested interest in it.
Yeah, that's great, and you have a great collection, and we love cards here. We try to talk a little more cards, so we appreciate your interest in the hobby. However, we did prepare some questions for you, so I'll start off. So we know you work Pistons. You worked Pistons most of the season until the Tigers started to ramp up, and now you're over there on the baseball side of things with Bally Sports. One thing that I've noticed, at least personally over the years, is your relationship with George Blaha. The voice of the Pistons since, I want to say, like 76. He got hired in, and he's been killing it ever since. He's still going strong. And I just want to know about your relationship with him and maybe how he's influenced you in your career ever since you came over here from Kansas City.
Yeah, I appreciate it. George is my guy. We've been working together, for about 10 years now, and I'll actually see him on Thursday. Because I'm jumping back to Pistons and Bulls, and then I'll do the last 3 games. I'll go to Dallas and San Antonio. But we sit next to each other on the plane, and, like, it's hard to explain. You've 48 years in the chair. Like, we all have aspirations. I know you guys do, as do I, as did George. And when you're able to talk with people that have found their niche or have carved out their own path in the industry, it's important to listen, lean, and learn. And so we all have our own unique style. You don't want to copy anybody else. One of the things that, George has obviously succeeded with so well over the years is, his passion for Detroit basketball. And so when you're in the chair for 48 years and you become the voice of, and you call 3 championships, and you have these, count that baby and a foul. You come up with some things over the years that stick, that people love. Like that's doing it. Like that's the apex, if you will. And not everybody gets those opportunities, and not everybody's afforded those opportunities. And most people don't have staying power in the profession. I think a lot of people force it early on, where they try to come up with their own catchphrase, or they try to create a style that maybe isn't authentic to them, and then they get found out. And so I think George did it his way, still does it his way. It's not a traditional, television call necessarily, because he, started on the radio side, but then it plays, like it works, like that's his style. So I think a lot of people, when they come out now, it's like they try to cookie cut into what they believe is needed, And sometimes you just need to go with what works for you. There isn't a particular style that has to fit. And so that's what I like about George is, he's a trailblazer. He's shared obviously some of expertise over the years with me. A lot of times you just learn by watching and listening. So, and he came up with the nickname, which has stuck, and that kind of stuff's important. Like, there's no bigger George Blaha fan than my mother, and which is fun, So she's always like, "How's George doing?" And he's just very kind. He's charming, and it's a treat for me. Honestly, I've worked with a lot of great people over the years, and at all the stops that I've had. But I consider him a friend, and he's always been a listening ear for me, not just with personal or professional stuff, but personally as well. So that's my guy right there.
It's funny you mentioned the nickname, because I was going to ask about that. I was going to ask, how did the nickname Smooth Johnny Kane come about? Did he just say it one random day and it stuck, or was he like, "Hey, how do you feel about Smooth Johnny Kane"?
Yeah, that's what's funny. He obviously has come up with so many good ones over the years with players. Like Mr. Big Shot, and he'll come up with certain nicknames for certain players, and then one day he went with that because, other people have come up with some, other stuff over the years. I don't know. I mean, everybody has nicknames, like with your friends or family. And then one day, he just started calling me Smooth, which, if you watch most of my reports, half the time I'm bumbling through it. So I never thought that was appropriate, but it's stuck. And obviously when he comes up with it, you're never allowed to pick your own nickname. And so I guess of all the nicknames I could have had bestowed upon me, I'll take that one for sure. But, he just came up with it organically. And honestly, whenever he calls me or texts me or whatever, it's just Smooth. That's all he says. "Hey, Smooth."
That's awesome.
So it's kind of cool.
I really like that story about the whole Smooth Johnny Kane. That's awesome from George. George is also one of my idols in the broadcast world, so it's awesome to hear that. But my question for you is, you've had some legendary interviews recently with Max the Mets fan.
Max the Mets fan.
What an interview, and probably one of my favorite interviews ever. You and with Donovan Edwards, and that is just a legendary interview. So when you do those interviews and you see the traction from just Detroit sports fans or just Detroit in general, how does that make you feel? And also a follow-up question. At the end of the Donovan Edwards interview, George Blaha said, "I hope you got something to eat." Did Donovan Edwards get something to eat after the interview?
Did he, in fact, get something to eat?
What's funny is we just interviewed Blake Corum the other day at the Tiger game, and he saw that interview that we did with Donovan. Those guys are real close, obviously. And he said, "What was it that Donovan said?" And I said, remember he said, "Man, look at my boys over here, all sexy." And he was feeling it that day. But to answer your question, man, I'll say it like this: like Max could have earned one of our 3 stars if we're being honest. To start the show. The thing about, as you guys know too, like I can tell, I don't know you guys all that well, but when you do a podcast or you do a show or you do interviews, you just want to be relatable and you want to be normal. And so that sounds pretty basic, pretty elementary, but that's the fact. And so I used to tell people when they were coming up in the business, like, do you feel like you're relatable? And do you have a large group of friends? Do people enjoy being around you? So when you do these types of interviews, the whole thing is you don't necessarily want to be putting on a show or put on an act. I know some people say, like, I sometimes I laugh quite a bit, but I feel like I laugh all the time, so it's not a bit, So,
yeah, that's a good thing too.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like you just need to be natural, and I typically laugh quite often. So sometimes when I do interviews, I get the giggling or whatever people say. Even when I did sports talk radio in Kansas City, the open they would always do was just like a laugh track, of whatever interviews, and I'd be laughing away. The only reason I bring that up is like I don't ever try to shy away from. You just have to be who you are. So, like the other day with Max, for example, we had cut to a couple shots of him in the crowd, and then you just need to take chances. So what we do try to do is go, and then I wouldn't say vet the interview because I want everything to be natural. Like I want everything to be authentic. So we used to, it's like, hey, go sit in stands with so-and-so, and then you'd wait an inning or an inning and a half, and if it's routine, we'll come to you. Well, then you fire most of your bullets, and then there's not an authentic reaction because you've already talked to this person for, 15 minutes. By the time they come to you, now you're just doing a typical Q&A. But when you want to make sure that the person is lucid, right, coherent, you don't want to go to somebody in the crowd, and then next thing you know, they're like, hey, they start whatever, they're not into it, or they're not, how do I say this? You don't want to go find somebody in the stands that looks like a fun bit, and then they're half in the bag or something. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Or they're ready to, spit something that maybe doesn't further the telecast. So anyway, I'll go and just make sure that everything's good, and then I'll tell the producer, okay, let's go with it. So like with Donovan, the other day, I'll give him, hey man, we're just gonna, I'll say, hey man, because I didn't really know him, and I'm just gonna ask you about, the team, your enjoyment here, or whatever. Because most people get a little bit nervous. You don't have to feed everybody your questions, but you kind of let them know where you're coming from, and you're not just going to blindside them with something, like, hey, how do you feel about, something political or something, and then they feel like they're blindsided and not comfortable. You just want to give them a sense of where you're going to go with the interview. So anyway, like with Max the other day, I went and sat with him for a second. I was like, hey, man, what's your story? And then I had like a just quick sense of it, and I said, okay, cool. I said, they're going to come to us with something next half inning. And then he stole the show, So then you just let them cook, You let them get going, and then an interview like that, it just happened spontaneously. It was organic, and then he carries the interview, and I literally was just there to, to give him a platform to go. So like that kind of stuff is awesome, and that's a lot of it. Sometimes just falls in your lap, but you have to be willing to go with it, and then just kind of like not necessarily have a preconceived notion of like, hey, I'm going to have them say this, this, and this. You just kind of let it go. And so same with Donovan. Like you let their personalities carry the day, and then if it resonates with people at home, then beautiful. And not every interview you do is going to do that. But anyway, that's like one of my favorite parts of the job, to be, completely honest. Like that's the whole beauty. Like you talk to athletes all the time, but sometimes it's like, let's just talk to let's just talk to people that are in an environment and then let them go. And then hopefully it plays with the audience. And if it does, and it's great. And if it doesn't, you live to fight another day.
So we know Simo got his jacket from Minnesota, right, for opening day. Did he ever get the lettuce jacket? I need to know.
No.
Was that deal ever made?
The deal should have been made. It wasn't made. And you'd be surprised how many people have asked about that just walking around the ballpark. But the deal should have been done, I'll be honest. That was a swing and a miss on my part.
I know that we've mentioned, and obviously you've mentioned your time in Kansas City, and one interview that I stumbled across is Paul Rudd. Can you tell me about how that interview went with Paul Rudd and why everybody should head to his mom's house?
Yeah, so that's another great example, right? So that was during the playoffs in 2014, and I used to cover the Kansas City Royals, and so Paul was from the area, and a lot of those guys, like Jason Sudeikis, Paul Rudd, Rob Riggle, a lot of those guys and the comedians that were there. So that was after the wild card win against the A's, and anyway, our producer got in my ear and said, just find anybody on the field that you can go and get. And so, again, it's just kind of pandemonium, or I wouldn't say pandemonium, but everybody's on the field, and you're just looking for a familiar face and then just, working the microphone. And then, so Paul was obviously fantastic, and same idea. He didn't really know me. I didn't really know him, obviously, but there's a reason why, those people are who they are. And so, I found him. I said, hey, man, could we do a quick bit? He's like, yeah, sure. And then you let him go, and then you just have a natural, reaction with him. So, for anybody that hasn't seen it, well, I'm sure most people haven't seen it, but if you have, that was like a first kind of like a viral type. Well, it was like a clip that took off, and they ran it in a bunch of different places. And basically, I asked him where the party was that night. He said, kegger at my mom's house, $5 cover. And then they actually made a T-shirt about it. You know how it is. It's like it was just wild, and but he was just himself. And then we let him be himself, and it was a live to tape interview. And so like we banged it, and then we fed it back. And then at the time you don't realize what it's going to turn out to be. You're just like, hey, I think we did something kind of fun with Paul Rudd. And then next thing you know, some of the major networks picked it up, and then, like I said, T-shirts were made. There's actually a picture of Paul and his mom with Kegger at my mom's house on it. I still have one of the T-shirts here, and people actually did show up at Paul Rudd's mom's house that night. There wasn't a huge number of people, but people that did know, who he was or where his mother lived, actually showed up. So, another great example of sometimes that things happen organically that you can't predict, and then you just ride it out.
Hey, Johnny, Michael Rosencrans here, and you are quite the avid traveler with the Tigers and the Pistons, and starting out in your career, too, you went to Ohio, another MAC school, to get your degree, which I believe was in 2004, correct me if I'm wrong, but you started out, as an anchor sports reporter at WKAG, then you moved on to 2 stations in Kansas, and then you even had a brief stint at the Big Ten Network before joining Fox Sports Detroit, what is obviously now Bally Sports Detroit, in the later years here. But just kind of wondering, who were your connections to get you to the Motor City?
Yeah, well, what's interesting, man, and I appreciate it. Yeah, it's been a heck of a journey. I'll be honest with you. When I first graduated from Ohio University, EW Scripps School of Journalism, I adored my time there. By the way, I loved my time there, and I wouldn't do anything differently. But I thought that probably like a lot of us, where you're thinking you're destined for the big time. It was just being, I was just kind of young and I wouldn't say immature. I just, I'm like, okay, well, I think I'll probably, I think I'm ready for ESPN, and ESPN didn't think that. And so I went from, Ohio to Kentucky to Kansas to Missouri to Michigan. And it's like, I did this basically Midwest and New South, trail. And now here we are 20 years later doing the thing. And most people probably wouldn't have, I wouldn't have expected my journey to go the way it's gone, but I wouldn't change any part of it. And so, to be honest with you, I worked in local television for about 12 years, and when I was in Kansas City, and I really appreciated covering the Royals, and I covered the Kansas Jayhawks and Kansas State Wildcats, Missouri, all that, Chiefs. So I covered those teams for about 9 years, but I wanted to get out of local television just because the way I saw the industry and as much as I appreciated being a sports, like a local news sportscaster, you get your 3.5 minutes at the end of the night, and you rip your highlight sets, and I enjoyed it. But I had done that for about 12 years, and I wanted to just call games. I just wanted to get into like a full network, and so I got to the regional network here in Detroit. But honestly, one of the guys who hired me saw that Paul Rudd clip. Funny that you brought that up. So it was like they saw that I was covering the Royals, and then they saw that clip, and then I was looking for work, and so I wrapped up that World Series run with the Royals in 2014. They lost in 7 games to Madison Bumgarner and the Giants. And I thought that was as close as I would ever come to covering a world champion. And I thought, hey, man, I'd come to Detroit. The Tigers, I think, had won 4 straight in the Central at that point. And I left. Kansas City came here. And the Royals ended up winning the World Series the year after I left. And the Chiefs have won a couple of Super Bowls, and the Kansas Jayhawks have won another national championship. And I came here, and now we're waiting to get this thing turned around, and hopefully we'll be covering champions here.
So staying on the topic of interviews, I saw an interview when I was just doing some research, and the interview was in Kansas City. However, you were a Tigers reporter, and you were doing a bit on Kauffman Stadium and just the stadium complex area. And there was a fan who we can just safely say does not like the Tigers or Javi Baez. My question stemming from that is, how do you handle the crowd when it is so unpredictable? You're in the stands, you're doing a bit, and all of a sudden, a 5-year-old hears a fun word, and now mom and dad are upset. So how do you handle that, and how do you, attack each interview while you are in an unpredictable space?
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Again, it has to be very natural. So, like in that particular case, it happens. So, I mean, when you're in a ballpark or a stadium or arena, especially when you're in, territory that's not your own, you're going to have people that are going to say stuff or people that try to shout toward you. Like, it happens, so it's like you don't need to pretend that it doesn't. But at the same time, it just needs to be a natural reaction. In that particular case, what jammed me up was, so when you're out in the stands or the field, I can't see the monitor, so I didn't know that I wasn't on, meaning like I didn't know that they didn't have a shot of me at that time, so I was taking it out of break. But the fan in question or whatever, he actually ran up behind me and put his hand on my shoulder and yelled into the mic. So
that's why it was so crystal clear.
Yeah. So, but at home you didn't see it, but I didn't know that. So basically, he comes and yells, blank Javi Baez and blank Detroit. So I was mad in the moment because A, it was a Royals fan. B, he didn't know that I used to cover Kansas City. And so it just kind of bummed me out because it was the one guy that happened to spoil it for the whole crowd. You know what I'm saying? Like, because he was pretty banged up, meaning, he was pretty inebriated. And so anyway, he comes and yells those things into my thing. And so it threw me off for a half second. I finished my report, but then I just kept looking over at him. But I wasn't trying to, be like, like take him to task on the air. But they happened to pick up when I did look over at him. And I was like, just in my mind, like, man, why'd you do that? So I do my little report. And then I just went over. I was like, come on, man. I'm like, why would you do that, dude? I said, I used to live here, And so anyway, I just had an exchange with him, but it was in the moment. People act crazy when cameras are on or, and he wasn't, I don't think he was, he wasn't trying to make it. I don't know. You just do some dumb things sometimes. You want a do-over. And so anyway, I just said, hey, man, why'd you do that? I was like, anyway, I just said, I used to work here. I said, fans here are awesome. And I was like, that stinks, man. Not like that had to happen. It was just in that moment. I was just kind of like, I was mad, So anyway, people picked up on it or something, and it's whatever. You just have to be ready. You always have your earpiece in, so you almost feel like you're just having a conversation with the booth, but you also know that all the stuff that's happening around you got to be ready for it. I've had guys jump into live shots, like throw the double birds up when I was in San Francisco covering the World Series. Other people run up and do stuff. But anyway, you just got to be ready to go. It's just normal human interaction. You know what I mean? I've had people, like, scare me on the air. You know what I mean? Like, it is what it is. You're going to have that whenever you're surrounded, like, in a true live shot in a live atmosphere. It's unpredictable, but I think the biggest thing is you don't have to pretend like you're totally unfazed. I mean, just as a human being, it's like sometimes you get rattled or things happen. It's just like have a natural reaction that people at home aren't going to be like, that's weird. Or pretend like you didn't, feel it or sense anything. It's like just be normal, I guess.
Now that we've dived into your most viral moments as a broadcaster, I want to talk a little Tigers because obviously you've been with the team a lot. You've been doing a lot of great bits with the Tigers. I loved the intro yesterday. Don't tell my professor. I was watching it in class while he was lecturing. Oh. And I couldn't stop laughing in the middle of class because it was great. The bit with Simo and Benetti and Simo fishing for compliments and Benetti just being, I lost my partner. Benetti's been a refreshing character, by the way.
A home run hire, I'd say.
For sure.
No, not home run. Grand slam hire.
Indeed.
There you go.
And you've been doing great with like the eclipse stuff, opening day, the festivities on opening day and covering them. There's a specific one that went a little viral, but it's a little I don't want to say not safe for work, but it went a little viral on the Twitter X sphere, since it's called X now. But you've been covering the Tigers to start the season. What is your kind of rough assessment of this team so far? Dropping that series to Oakland, splitting the series to Pittsburgh, opening with the White Sox and the Mets. So what are your assessments so far of the Tigers?
Well, when it is early on, you got to beat the teams in front of you, and obviously, the scheduling worked out well when you start in Chicago because Chicago is a team that they're trying to figure themselves out, and obviously the Mets are too, even though they made a bunch of off-season moves. The Oakland series, was a disappointment? Yeah, I guess because, the way that the year went. But when you're going to play a lot of tight games or one-run games or extra inning games, at the end of the day, every time they roll out the baseball, one team's going to win and one team isn't. And when they got up to the great start, you're thinking sky's the limit, and then you get humbled a little bit, and a 3-game slide's not the end of the world. But, yesterday you show some grit, fight to the 27th out, and now you get to 7 wins, and now you got a big series coming up against Minnesota. So, look, they're young. It's going to be a little streaky. I don't even know if I would consider that too streaky, 4 straight, and then, and then to lose 3 straight, and then, to get it going again. You just got to be in it, just keep, just stay in it. And I think pitching's going to carry the day ultimately. And, the last couple of games, it was, I was, I guess a little surprised the other day when, Reese Olson was struggling with his command a little bit, but you don't expect that from Reese. And so, sometimes you just don't have it, but more often than not, he's going to. So pitching's going to carry the day. I like their starting rotation. Obviously, we love their bullpen. Foley's another guy who could have gotten a star for us, just the way he's been throwing it, on the back end of the bullpen. So, look, they're young, they're fun, they're athletic. You can plug and play guys in a lot of different spots. A.J. Hinch, more than any manager I've covered, does a great job of not just understanding it, but getting everybody involved. And so he empties out the roster, or the bench, I should say, almost every game. And he waits for opportunities to get guys in, so they're always engaged. So it's a fun group to be around, I'll be honest with you, man. I think last year I said was my favorite team to cover just because of the personalities and the way they went about their business. I think you probably, in this division, just knowing what it is, and again, like you said, Minnesota's coming to town next, that's probably the team to beat in the division, obviously the defending Central champs. So what do you need to win the division? You probably need to get to 90 or above, 90 wins. And so is that possible with this team? Yeah, I do. I think it is possible. And so I think that's kind of a number that you look at and say, okay, well, that's where we've got to be, maybe 90, somewhere between 90 and 92 wins. And that's a big step forward from where we were last year, but I think they can do that. So I like this team a lot. I like the construction. Roster construction is important. And we'll just see. I think you get, let's get maybe, 20, 30, 40 games in and then say, okay, what does it look like? Right now you're still trying to plug and play and figure out, what lineup maybe works the best. And you're still going to massage that for a little bit in these first couple of weeks.
Quick question on continuing on the Tigers here, Johnny. One of the big things that I've noticed, and that a lot of us probably noticed with the Tigers, is the offensive bats are still a little bit of a struggle. This is still a very young team. It's still very early in the season, so we have a lot of games to play out in order to see if the bats can wake up a little bit. How did you feel about the moves that Scott Harris was making and knowing that he wanted to keep the bats around while bolstering pitching? Was the bats something that you would have wanted to see improve?
Well, I think there's going to be a natural progression. Like, Torque hasn't gotten going the way that he's going to get it going. Last year, obviously, he finished the second half, so strong. You don't get to 31 homers by accident. So he'll get, he's going to get there. Heck, he could get there by the end of this week. And he's been hitting balls hard. We'll just wait for the first one to leave the yard, and then, boom, you unhitch it, and then he's gone. Riley Green already with 3 homers. Those guys are going to take steps forward. To me, one of you had mentioned Gio Urshela. It's look at what Gio Urshela and Mark Canha have done as off-season additions. Those guys have carried the day a couple of times already. So you're adding veteran presence in addition to the young bats, like Kerry Carpenter you mentioned. I'm not worried about the offense. I know that they haven't put up with a bunch of crooked numbers necessarily early, but it's super early. You know what I'm saying? They had a great spring. You get it going, and what do we always say before? It's hey, when the weather warms up, the bats are going to get hot. It's not an old cliche. I think with a younger team like this, you get through a couple of games, you get through a couple of weeks into the season, and then I think we'll see what it looks like. But I like the way that they look with their young offense, and like I said, with the additions of guys, and Carson Kelly too. You talk about some veteran guys that have helped and have shown something offensively. With Kelly, Canha, Urshela, those are nice additional pieces to build around that young nucleus.
Those were great pieces, and the Tigers are winning. They're winning games 7-3. They're going to face the Twins on Thursday, 12:30, I believe, on Bally Sports. Another 3 in the 313 day on Thursday. It's going to be a busy day in the Motor City. Moving on to a team that does not win, the Detroit Pistons. Now, I'm the resident Detroit Pistons super fan. I'm on a 7-year streak of watching this team every single night that they play. I have not missed a game in 7 years. I don't know if I'm doing okay with that. But the Pistons, they continue to struggle. I mean, I'd say about 2 or 3 weeks ago, we started getting some wins. I think we won like 2 out of 3 or 3 out of 4. And ever since then, we've been a little off our wheels, I guess you could say. Of course, Cade being out doesn't really help that, but we want him to be healthy. We want him to be playing healthy. We don't want him to get injured in a 13-win season as of right now. But, Johnny, you covered this team for a majority of the season, the 28-game losing streak, the infamous 28-game losing streak. How has it been, covering this team, and especially during the 28-game losing streak? Like, were there any differences compared to any other season, or was it just, they're professionals and they move on from each loss, how they move on?
Yeah, I mean, people have asked me about that. If you just do the math, right, so you play an 82-game schedule, Tigers play 162, it would be like the Tigers losing 56 straight, right?
Yeah.
When we put it in terms like that, it's like, geez, I mean,
it's staggering.
Nobody thought that was going to happen. I mean, when we got to 10 or 12 or 15, nobody's thinking like, well, we're going to bust it tonight. But looking back on it is like, what? It happened. It happened, and I don't think anybody saw it coming. They were in a ton of games. It wasn't like you were just, rolling the ball out and just getting, shellacked every night. But,
that's true. They were very close in most games.
Yeah, so I mean, look, again, roster construction is important. So you want to see what pieces play. You want to try to get the continuity of guys playing on the floor at the same time, and they didn't really have a bunch of that. You know what I mean? Like with Cade and Jaden Ivey on the floor at the same time, and then running with like Duran and Stewart on the floor at the same time. I mean, you had guys that were coming in and out of the lineup due to injuries, and so you just weren't able to build the continuity. And then with Monty Williams bringing in a new system, and it takes some time. And I know people don't necessarily want to hear that, and I get it. I mean, fans are fans. It's like you said, if you're not missing a game and you're rolling it over every year, or somebody like George Blaha who's seen the good, the bad, the ugly. And it's like you don't necessarily want to be patient because in your fandom, you're like, well, I've been waiting for this for so-and-so. I get it. But if you're going to bring in a whole new system and you're going to bring in some new pieces and then you want to see, okay, what works, what doesn't. It's like when you launch a podcast. Mm-hmm. What works, what doesn't. So every year you're tinkering, right? You're tweaking. You're saying, hey, man, this worked, and hey, let's go here. Hey, let's go show flow like this, or let's try this. Let's hit the show with this. Like, it evolves. You're not who you're going to be. You continue to grow as it develops. So the same with the Pistons. And when you bring in a new system and you bring in new coaches and you bring in new players, you've got to figure out and you got to be patient, because if you see the forest for the trees, eventually you'll see what it's going to become. So has it been lean in a lot of respects as far as wins and losses? Yeah. Can you honestly look at the team and say, I see development? Yeah. Jaden Ivey's development from game 1 to now game 78? Yeah, you can see a difference. So Jalen Duran, maybe the steal of the draft at 16 2 years ago, right?
I think it was 13. Was
saying,
it was 12 or 13.
I think it was 13. We traded
13
with the Knicks or the Hornets. He got drafted by the Hornets. The pick went to the Knicks, and we traded with the Knicks.
Yeah, he was 13, and what Isaiah Stewart, I think, was the 16th.
Yes.
But you see what I'm saying? So it's like, you go and find some pieces. Now, obviously, they're going to get another top pick. You brought in, you got something for your veteran guys that were here with, Bogdanovich and Burks, right? And then, so who are the veterans going to be this offseason now that you have cap space to play with? Can you get somebody that wants to be here that can be a high-end player to add in? We just have to see how it's going to play out. It's an important offseason, I'll give you that. Like, it's going to be a very important offseason with respect to what they do in free agency with cap space. And it's not particularly a strong draft class based on the way people project it now. That could all change once guys get to the pros, and then you see how it translates. But the belief by most experts is that this isn't the strongest draft class going in. But again, it's all projection. So it's an important off season, and certainly you want to take a big step forward. But I'm eager to see them get this thing turned around. It's going to take a little bit, but there's enough good young pieces there that they should be something here in seasons ahead.
So I watch every broadcast, and I've memorized something.
Oh, my God.
And
I've memorized it, too.
I've memorized George Blaha's ad read going into Greg's game plan. Now, it sounds crazy, but Pistons basketball on Bally Sports Detroit is brought to you by your local Toyota dealers. Visit buyatoyota.com. Toyota, let's go places. And by Cure Auto Insurance, a proud partner of the Detroit Pistons. He'll go on about, what's Greg's game plan, and that's coming up on Greg's Game Plan, brought to you by your Southeast Michigan Ford dealers. Here's Special K. Thanks a lot, George.
Yeah,
and then he goes in.
We're suffering, let's say that. But
we watched the Pistons instead of the Wings last night.
We watched more of the Wings last night.
I mean, I turned on the Pistons for the first half, and then at halftime I was like, let's check in on the Wings. And then, let's go back to the Pistons. We made it a one-point game in the third quarter. We did.
Yeah.
And I'll give them credit for that, but then the wheels kind of fell off there towards the end. But, yeah, we've memorized the ad read before Craig's game plan.
That's impressive.
I think I'm probably a top 5 Pistons fan. And currently right now, I've missed...
Out of 5?
I'm out of 5 Pistons fans. I'm like probably 3. But I have not... Well, I think I've watched more Pistons games this year than I've had in the past 2. Because like with Cade's year, and I explained this on Monday's show, with Cade's year, I probably missed like 20 or 30 games. Last year, Jaden Ivey's rookie year, I probably missed the same thing, 20, 30 games. This year, I've only missed, I counted 7 games.
Look at that.
It's the Anthony Schulte effect, Johnny, and I have not... I can't afford to miss a Pistons game.
I invite him over almost every single game because I don't want to watch alone.
Yeah, listen, I was a big Pistons fan before this year, and then this year I became an even bigger Pistons fan. But for my question for you is, obviously, this year's been a down year, a 13-win year, not great.
Not ideal.
When our expectations was supposed to be 30 or 35 wins, but... What do you think about this future? Because, we still have Cade, we still have Ivy, we still have Dern, we got Fontecchio.
Asar, don't forget
we got
Asar
Thompson, who we don't know might come back. We got...
He should.
Quentin Grimes, who, obviously, Asar's... The blood clot was found early.
Yes.
With Chris Bosh, it was found later in his career, and obviously that to put him in retirement. But because he found it so early, I feel like he'll be fine. But
he
anyways,
should be okay.
Quentin Grimes, who we haven't seen a lot, but I really like him, and... we have these young veteran pieces like
top 5 pick,
a top 5 pick. Hopefully, I really want Sarr really bad, but I want to hear your thoughts. And obviously, Monty Williams, who really likes coaching the younger guys and could lead with a younger team. Although he had a 13-win year, I still have a little hope left with Monty Williams.
He still did make it to a conference final or into a finals.
He did, but I'm starting to lose hope with Monty Williams, but still, I want to give him one more year. I want to hear your thoughts on what do you think the future is with the Pistons.
Yeah, again, you listed a bunch of pieces, right? And so what do we always talk about? Roster construction is important, and a lot of these guys, if you look at the back of their basketball card, there is young, so they are young, so there is promise. And then you say, okay, how do they project? What are they going to look like, right? Like with Asar Thompson. Plays the game exceptionally well in this area, this area, this area, this area, and, quote unquote, once he develops a jump shot, look out. So when does that come in? Right? Isaiah Stewart, junkyard dog, when he comes up, and then now he develops this perimeter shot, right, where you can spread the floor a little bit. Now you don't have to play him at a traditional 5. Okay, now he looks a little bit different. Cade Cunningham, not 100% fully healthy because they're still doing the injury management, with the knee, but, coming off the stress reaction surgery, you say, okay, well, once that solidifies, what does he look like? Like, what do his numbers project every year? Ivy, right, he's not getting any slower. Duran, right, he's a walking double-double. So you have all these nice individual pieces, and how does it all fit together, and how does it work? So, as I mentioned before, it's a big off season with respect to who are you going to bring in? Like, who's going to be the top flight free agent addition? And then that will dictate kind of the direction of what the offense is going to look like. I don't have an answer on who they go get, who they target, and what that area of need is. I do believe if you look at Monty Williams' track record, even going back to New Orleans, obviously what he did in Phoenix, and when you have a generational guard like Chris Paul, that helps, and obviously a generational talent like Devin Booker, it helps. But does that talent exist on this roster, and are you patient enough to see that system play out and then see what it's going to show in seasons 3, 4? So I'm heartened by it. You know, I want to believe in it. I'm optimistic. I think by nature, I think as a Pistons fan, you have to be. And so I like some of the core pieces they have. Quentin Grimes has to get healthy, so we see what he actually brings. I like Simone Fontecchio a bunch. Right? He's the right kind of player that fits this offense. So, you know, I like it, right? But 13 wins, I think, for everybody is like, man, that's tough to sit through, and I get it. And so even if you said, let's be honest, so we have 4 games left, right?
Yeah. 3
games left.
Chicago, Dallas, San Antonio.
Dallas, San Antonio. So you say, so we got games 7, 80, 81, 82.
Mm-hmm.
And you say, let's say we win, heck, let's just say you win 3 of them. So that puts you at 16 wins. If you doubled your win total next year, you're at 32 wins. Does that put you in the play-in game? No. Right? So then you've got to, you've got to take leaps and bounds. You got to make leaps and bounds, take giant steps forward. But let's get to the end of this one, continue to develop, get to the off season, and then see. But you have to take big strides in short order in order to get into playoff contention.
You not only do play-by-play for the Pistons, Johnny, but I've seen you do play-by-play for Football Fridays on Bally Sports when you cover it. And I'm sitting next to a proud Lake Orion graduate, and,
Yes.
I'm the Clarkston graduate myself. Go Wolves. I do play-by-play for them.
Go Ramblers. I'm a Fraser grad.
Go
Sorry.
Dragons, I just got to say, because everybody else said go their team. Go Dragons.
There you go. But sticking with the subject of the Pistons, Johnny, are you able to get any mentorship or anything of substance from George whenever you do play-by-play for him? Do you get much of a critique, whether it's from George, whether it's your bosses at Bally Sports? How do you go about that? And more importantly, how do you deal with the people who may have differing opinions when different broadcasters are on the air?
Yeah, I think, again, you got to trust your voice in those situations. So I call the game, very differently than George. I call the game differently than, say, like we mentioned, Jason Benetti, who's obviously become, very close with me. Jason has his style. George has his style. I have my style. When you listen to Dan Miller, with the Lions, like he has his style. Listen to Ken Daniels with the Wings. He has his style. You have to dance with what brought you. You know what I mean? And so there has to be a trust in that. But for sure, like when I first started sitting in the chair when George was out to do, say, Michigan State football, and you get a chance to do an NBA broadcast, you listen. And my bosses, for sure, I mean, they're always going to have critiques for you, but you have to trust your voice and go about it your way. I'm not a traditional, like my style isn't a tradition. I didn't have formal play-by-play tutelage, so I know just based on, like you guys, if you watch all but 7 Pistons games this year, you have an idea. So if I put a headset on, you could get through it. Now, are you doing the hows and whys, and are you laying out for your analyst, and are you rising to meet the moment? You know what I mean? Are you, there's a lot of things that go into it. It's not as easy as just putting it on and just describing the action, but you could probably get through a telecast, or get through a game broadcast. But then how do you get through 82 of them? Or if you did baseball, let's say, how do you get through, if you're going to call 100, like Dan Dickerson, he has his own style. If you're going to do 162 baseball games, you can't empty the clip on game 1 of a series against Minnesota, right? So what storylines do you thread in? There's a lot to it. It's a very delicate dance. So, like doing high school football, for example, I enjoy that as much as anything. And you probably go to your spotting boards, you go to your sheets, your rosters more than you would an NBA game because, like, let's say last night when, Pistons Sixers, you probably know the 10 guys that are out on the floor without having to look down and say, oh, that's, Shemezi Metu. Like, you would already know it. So you don't have to necessarily go to your sheets. When you're calling high school football against two teams that you have never seen before, and there's 22 kids on the field, right? And then when they flop, then there's another 22. If you, like at state championship Saturday, when you're calling two games, that's a lot of names, numbers, and statistics to have, like, ready. So sometimes you have to be able to go down, but you can't miss the action in front of you, right? So all that stuff comes with time. I think it's in order for your true voice to come out, it's all comes in your preparation leading up to the game. So if you didn't know your subjects, if you didn't know who was going to be playing, if you don't know how to identify the characters in the game the way you want to because you're trying to be rehearsed, you're trying to work in a catchphrase, or you're looking down at your sheets to figure out who number 72 in white is, you're not going to be into your flow. So the obsession with, like, calling a game, like, I don't do, just to be clear here, I don't do drugs, but I always say, like, putting a headset on, it's like a narcotic, you know what I mean? It's like, it's intoxicating. It's like when you put the headset on and call and narrate a game, it's like I can't describe that emotion to anybody else. There's nothing like it. And most of the people that do it, like George is still doing it. There's a reason why people go there and they don't retire, because there's nothing like calling a game. Nothing. And so, but the obsession has to be in your preparation leading up to it. Like, I'll sit at home, like, there were times I'll go to my hotel room and you just, like, lock yourself in your hotel room and, like, you're in it, right? You just study it, just like you would for a test. You're in it. You're just, like, trying to figure out storylines. You're trying to figure this out. You're trying to have names and nuggets. So that way, when the game presents itself, it's in there somewhere in your brain, and then you're just going and grabbing it, as opposed to, like, looking it up on the fly. But that's where, like, that's when you're most prepared to go call a game. It's like, I've done all my preparation. The hay is in the barn. Players take the field. You are looking live, and let's go. You know what I mean? There's nothing like it.
I have one more final question for you. It kind of circles back to your interviews. And a team that I want to highlight is the 2019 Detroit Tigers. Now, I have a trivia question for you guys. And I found this out yesterday, and this is a name that I have not heard in years. But can you name the man who led the Tigers in 2019, the 114-loss Tigers team in home runs?
Who led the team in home runs?
Who led the team? I'll give you a hint. He had 15.
Was it Hit and Harold?
No.
Wow, 2019 Tigers.
Yeah, I know this just because I actually just communicated with him recently.
I did.
Really?
Yeah.
Is it Willie?
No.
It's not Willie Castro.
It's a very oddball name.
Nico Goodrum?
No.
Was it Jamer Candelario?
No.
Oh, was
Any
it
more
Candy?
guesses?
Paredes?
No. Brandon Dixon.
Yep. No.
He led the team in 15 home runs. That's a little trivia that we like to do here on the show. I wanted to highlight that for any new listeners and new viewers. But is there a difference? Obviously, this year it's a huge difference than 2019. But is there a difference between highlighting a team like the Tigers back then, like when we were like really bad, to now when we have really high expectations, possibly a division winner?
As far as, like, describing the guys, you mean?
Yes.
Like, so my role as a reporter. So we just talked about play-by-play and what that is. From a reporter standpoint, I always feel like my job is to identify the characters in the game. And so, like, when you mentioned Brandon Dixon, like, the fact that I knew about the home run deal because we had just talked recently. He just walked away, just had a baby, and he was such a great guy. And then, like, Brandon deserved to wear the uniform, but there was a point in time, like during the rebuild, where a lot of these guys that came up, it would be like, I wouldn't say happy to be there, but in any other year when the expectations would be what they were, they're probably not on a major league roster. You know, and so a lot of it's timing in life. So when do you get opportunities? And so some of these guys were able to live out their big league dreams for a season or half of a season or a couple of seasons, and then you're out of baseball, and it's like, well, man, it went by quick. Well, obviously, the better you are as a organization, you know, the depth you have in the system, you know, if you are a fringe player, like a 4A player, you probably never make it up to the show. So there were some years there with the Tigers where you just knew a lot of the guys that were up, it was like they wanted to take a look at and evaluate, and then, do they have major league staying power? But when I say identify the characters in the game, like I remember, when I did a story with Brandon Dixon, we tried to do stuff like away from the field, or because we're just guys. So it's like you guys are guys, like whatever your routine is in the morning. Like I go through my routine, and then like, say you guys are really good at sports talk, and maybe you guys are really good at something else in life, and maybe I'm really good at this. Or a guy like Brandon Dixon or Spencer Torkelson or Casey Mize, they're really good at this. But we're just guys. So when I say describe the characters, or like you humanize the characters because when you sit home and you're watching on television, you're just like, hey man, why didn't he get a hit there? But at the end of the day, he's just a guy. So I always try to do as a reporter is just to humanize the players, because I get to see them every day. I get to be around them all the time, and they just happen to be really good at the game, the game of baseball. But that, what makes them work, or the way that they're wired, I think is important. I do. And some people, like you said about different broadcasting styles, like how do you handle that? It's like in politics. If you're never going to win all the votes, and whether or not you're, like, let's say you're either a Michigan or Michigan State fan. So how does a Michigan or Michigan State fan watch, an Oakland University game? Like, I'm kind of in between, or I don't care. So, you're never going to have 100% of the fan base. So let's say, like in politics, if it's 50-50, in broadcasting, what is it? You might resonate with, say, 65% of the audience. 65-35. Some people may not like your style, but that's just the way that it goes. It's like being an artist or being a singer. If you say, hey man, I really like, like let's say one of you is like, yeah, I love Taylor Swift, and the other one's like, I'm not really into it. But guess what? A lot of people do like her, and not everybody does. So same with broadcasting. Like my style as a reporter or as a play-by-play guy, I'm just being true to who I am. And some people may not like the way I go about it or the questions that I ask, but that's what I'm genuinely curious about. So I just try to humanize the players. So it's like some people will be like, I don't care about that. I just want to hear about the numbers. Well, then maybe my style doesn't suit you, but that's okay. But that's the way that I look at my role, is just to humanize the guys. So that way you feel like you could relate to them. Like, hey man, what's Jaden Ivey like? Oh, I didn't realize that. Or I didn't realize that Isaiah Stewart was like this. Or that, Malachi Flynn did what? You're just like, oh, the guy who scored 50? Like, my whole thing is, like, give you something to, like, so that you can look and watch these guys and be like, man, I liked him because I didn't know that about him. Like, when Brandon Dixon and I went paddleboarding under the bridge out on the Detroit River, like, we just talked about life and growing up in La Jolla, California. He grew up in La Jolla, and it was just like we just talked about life. You know what I'm saying? And then we ran that on Inside the Tigers, and now people that watched it. So now your trivia question, 19 home runs, led the Tigers in 2019, and he grew up in La Jolla, and he has a son, and he likes to do this. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of the way that I look at it. Like you still describe the guys who they are. Like Spencer Torkelson was a great junior hockey player. You know what I mean? And feels like maybe his wrist shot helped him with his baseball swing. Like that's something that people don't forget at home. Like that's the kind of stuff that I like to do.
And I think that's what makes you such a great broadcast reporter, play-by-play, because you are so uniquely yourself. And you don't really look at what other people are saying. You just go about it your way, and it's your style, and you don't waver, and that is amazing. Well, Johnny, that's about all the time we do have today. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us this morning. We really appreciate your time.
Hey, you guys are great. I really appreciate it, and continued success on the journey.
All right, thank you. Likewise. Thank you. All right, boys. Well, that was a spectacular interview. Johnny, what a guy. If you're watching back, Johnny, thank you again for joining us. Before we head off, the Red Wings, a little update on the Red Wings, did lose to the Capitals yesterday, which was an important game when it comes to seeding. So an even more important game against the Penguins of Pittsburgh coming up on Thursday. Another big day in Detroit sports. Pistons and Bulls, the final home game of the year. Red Wings and Penguins. And then the Tigers start off the day at home against the Twinkies. Boys, what do we think of Johnny Kane? He was great, wasn't he?
Yeah, first of all, I want to thank Brady Klima for hooking us up.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Brady, once again for hooking us up with Johnny Kane. I really appreciate it, and we really appreciate you. It was a phenomenal interview. He obviously gave us insight in his life in Kansas City before coming to the Motor City. It was a very insightful interview, a very nice interview, and oh man, I really loved hearing his stories and the way that he interviews. It's going to help me in the long term, especially with this show. And once again, thank you, Johnny, for coming on. We really appreciate it.
It's so great when you have two of arguably the best in the business coming on your show. Johnny, we really appreciate your time today, and I really appreciate the insight on play-by-play. As someone who wants to go into play-by-play myself, there is a lot more that I know I can do, and there's a lot more that I need to trust myself in. And I love the insight that you gave about, trusting your own flow, trusting your own style, and just kind of ignoring and blocking out that noise. It's something I still need to work on, but it is very insightful. I will take that fully into account, and I can't wait to continue going forward with a career in sports media and hopefully play-by-play. Johnny, thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, and that's all the time we have for today's show. Thank you for tuning in to Card Guys, Season 2, Episode 23 on Today 91.5 The Mountain, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. Tune in Monday as we venture back to the 101.1 studio to talk Pistons, Wings, Tigers. The NBA playoffs are going to be coming up very soon. The play-in tournaments next week. And Monday, it's a WNBA draft. We're going to talk a little WNBA draft as well. Should be a fun one. For my good buddies, Ryan Donnelly and Michael Rosenkrantz, and our special guest, Johnny Kane, I'm Anthony Schulte saying, so long, everybody.
Love you, Mom and Dad. The Masters is also this weekend.
Thanks for watching, Dad, with the cat. See ya.